Well, hello, guys. You're listening to Beauty Bytes with Dr. K, Secrets of a Plastic Surgeon. And today on the podcast, we're going to talk about beauty from the inside. And I have a most unexpected guest. It's professional heavyweight boxer Ed Latimore. He not only was a former boxer, but also a competitive chess player, best-selling author, BA in physics. He's realized self-development. He writes about self-development, sobriety, reaching your potential, and just kind of getting over all the things that life hands to you, and making beautiful things out of that. And welcome, Ed. How are you?
Hey, thank you for having me, doctor. I'm pretty good.
Amazing. Well, so how many years were you a boxer?
All total 12. I think I was 12 of my amateur career, and the amateurs where you don't get paid and there's headgear and stuff, but that's how get the real accolades like the Golden Gloves or get to the Olympics or a national championship. I did that for 6 years, and then I turned pro January 28th. I used to have the date memorized, like because you never forget. I think it was the 28th or the 26th. I know it was the last week of January of 2013 is when I turned pro, and I was pro until I officially decided to stop at the end of 2018.
So you grew up in the projects. Was that something that influenced you to become a boxer? Were you practicing self-defense?
No, no. You know what's funny is that when I was younger, I had no interest at all in fighting, even out of high school. It just wasn't a thing that, I think some guys like kind of talked to me about it and always looked really interesting. But I didn't start boxing until the ripe old age of 22. And I didn't start boxing, and well, rather, the main reason why I started boxing is there was a girl I was dating when in my early 20s, late teens. And I had also tried to go to college the first time. This is key to the story, even though it seems unrelated. I tried to go to college right out of high school, like everyone normally does, and I was not ready. I failed out in 3 semesters, and I spent the next, 3 years or so on this kind of anti-college tirade. Now, I still think college is kind of a waste. The difference is now I got a degree in a very difficult subject, so no one can really say anything to me. But I used to talk about this to everyone who would listen. And one of the people who would listen was her mother, who happened to be a professor of biology at the University of Pittsburgh. And so, you can imagine that doesn't go over too well. And one day everything really came to a head. She said to me, she said, okay, let's pretend you're right and college is a waste. What have you done for the past 4 years besides show up here and eat my food? And then she threw me out. And I went home and I thought about it, and I shed a little man tear. I cried a little bit because it was harsh, but it was true. And I said, well, I haven't really done anything. I don't have anything to show for it. So I was like, what am I going to do with my life? And I was looking at the military, and YouTube had just come out and they were putting up videos of fights. And I looked at videos of fights and I said, they were just sending people over to Iraq and everything. And I wasn't really, trying to get shot up yet, or not ever really. But I chose to go with boxing instead. And so I walked into a boxing gym with the sole intent of doing something as opposed to doing nothing in my life. And it ended up just 22. Well, I was 22, so what was that 22, 32, 14 years ago. And it ended up being one of the best decisions I ever made, and really changed my life in many ways.
Well, what do you love about boxing? I've done a little bit of kickboxing, but I just can't imagine getting hit, actually physically hit. Isn't that like a little hard on the
You
body?
never you never get used to getting hit. It's not like a hot bath or something. Like every shot jars you. What I enjoyed about the sport is it was genuinely difficult, and not just the fighting part. Like that is probably obvious. The physical demands it places on you, but a lot of the psychological and emotional demands. There's nowhere else really to get that kind of stress.
Hmm.
For example, throughout the entirety of my career, I had to work with this attitude that a fight can end at any time, or not end, but never happen. Like my opponent could pull out, which happened both at the amateur and early professional level. Uh, they could just decide they're not going to put on the fight for reasons beyond my control or influence. And that didn't mean I could slack off. I still had to stay prepared. I still had to stay focused. I still had to put my body through the ringer. I made a lot of sacrifices during my fight career. One of the biggest ones was that I never was able to do any real meaningful work or have any meaningful jobs because you have to train. You need time to train, and if you want to be good, you have to train. The trade-off is you also got to pay your rent and your bills. So I worked a variety of jobs while I fought. I was a barista at Starbucks. I was a security guard at a homeless shelter.
Yeah.
Uh, what else? There's something in there that I'm not thinking of. Oh, right. I volunteered for AmeriCorps. Right when I finished that, I got an interesting job doing home inspections and and interestingly enough, a lot of public housing projects. So, and then these jobs worked. They weren't high paying, but they allowed me to train, and so I was dedicated to that goal. I took a lot of risk, smart risk though. There was a time my license was suspended, but I needed to get to the gym that was 20 miles away. So, and not only was my license suspended, the car I was driving couldn't pass inspection. So
Wow.
there was no way I was going to be inspected, and because of that, I couldn't get insurance either, even if I could afford it. So I was just driving up and down Route 65 to the gym, about 20 miles each way. Always, I had mastered the art of like looking behind me, 3 or 4 cars to see if there were police anywhere, and I knew exactly where I could pull off. And that experience, because I did that, opened up a lot of other doors for me because it allowed me to get the caliber of training I needed for the point I was in my career. And so my favorite part about boxing, what I loved about it, and what I still love about it, is how fundamentally difficult it is. It's just outright challenging, and that weeds out a lot of people. That weeds out a lot of people. That develops a lot of weaknesses. It's true self development in the sense that you have to become someone different to succeed than you were when you came in.
You have to harden yourself a little bit
Oh,
to
absolutely,
take a hit and to give a hit.
and 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 you have to harden yourself with control. I
Right.
couldn't just become some savage, right? It
Yeah.
was
You have
just
to be
uh,
precise and measured.
precise and disciplined,
Yeah.
and still, and then there's the whole lesson of selling tickets and managing that. It was really kind of a slight introduction into business because you have to sell your own tickets when you first start.
Now, do you think boxing was what drove you to begin drinking? Because you've written a bestseller book about sober letters to your drunken self. What was it about the pressure of boxing or that life that kind of drove you to alcohol and your battle with alcohol?
So I think about this a lot, and I don't think boxing led to drinking. I've more or less narrowed it down to elements from my childhood that I didn't deal with that persisted into my adulthood, and then I said this is the best way to cope, which were particularly abandonment issues. I think, and I felt I didn't feel comfortable. To this day, I still don't feel like my friends like me, as weird as that sounds. And it's not like I'm like, oh, you hate me in secret, but I don't let them know certain things going on in my life because I'm like, oh, why would you care? They're really important. That's how I felt. And so for me to fit in, I felt like I had to drink. I didn't,
More of
and
an
I wanted to drink,
introvert.
and that yes, more so than I used to think. I've come to terms with that. What boxing did in relation to drinking is because I came with discipline, right? That's just how I came out the box, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I could stop drinking when I was like preparing for a fight. But right after the fight, man, that was an excuse to go wild. That was an excuse to go crazy.
Yeah.
It also allowed me to kind of build this persona of this wild guy. I fight and I drink, and I fight and I drink. And there came a point, this is probably 6 to 8 months before I stopped drinking. I started having these thoughts like, okay, maybe I drink too much. All right. I think that's how we all get there. And I said, I'm going to go out and I start coming up with ways to kind of trick myself. Like, I'm going to leave my wallet at home. I'm going to come up with these little 30-day challenges where I don't drink. And what would start to happen is I'd go out and people would go, oh, you know, well, that's cool. Drinks on me. Because people just want to hang out with you when you're doing something cool. You know, I wasn't like famous by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe like a C-level celebrity in my city in the boxing circle, right? That was like the extent of my popularity from boxing. And it was no problem. It was no problem of having people who would want to come out and drink with me, party, just say they hung out with me.
It's hard to
And
be
so,
disciplined. What do you think of these? What do you think of these dry January challenges where people are like, they drank all through the holidays and now they're dry for all of January? Does that even really work? Is there even a point to
does it work?
challenge?
You know, I think here's what I think based on because I've given myself several, quote unquote dry challenges. In fact, one of the most interesting results of that is that I ended up having a spectacular date with the now fiance, and I think if I had showed up in my normal drunken state 10 years ago, I would have been in a very different place and behaving differently. But for normal people, for a lot of people who are doing the dry January thing, I don't think you try dry January unless you have a question. And dry January will answer that question because a lot of people can't do it. I'm in a lot of the forums on Facebook, so I just want to see, and it's a good place to promote my book and also connect with people. And a lot of people don't stick with it. In my mind, I'm like, 31 days, right? But that's, my perspective as a guy who's gone 8 years without drinking.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't go 31 days, I think you've answered the question. and maybe you didn't like that answer. Whether you do something with that information is a totally different discussion. But I don't think you do dry January if you feel good about your comfort level or you feel good about your relationship with alcohol. There's a small percentage of guys that just come in and do it for discipline's sake, but those people don't tend to wait until January to do something like that, nor do they make it a big kind of group deal, because that's what dry January provides in a real sense, because a lot of us drink. I know this was big for me, as I was saying, we drink for some type of social social club, and where the cost of entry is a night out with drinks or something, and it just so happens that the value or the cost soon as exceeds its value. But dry January gives you that in place of it. So my opinion is it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. But what you do with it afterwards is different, because a lot of people who are addicts, they're gonna do what addicts do, all in or all out. I was the exact same way. After I would do my little, 2-week or 3-week challenges, man, it'd be straight
again.
binge mode. Yeah.
Yeah. This society really does promote binging, whether it's Netflix binging or alcohol binging. It's challenging. But I think I interviewed another guest on the podcast, Doc Amen, who's a neurologist who looks at brain function. And he sees so much damage that occurs in the brain related to just regular social drinking. Like even 1 to 2 drinks a week can really cause brain damage for women's brains. Women are more susceptible.
Oh yeah.
But really interesting, because one of his questions is like, why does our society attach alcohol to fun so much? Why can't you have fun and not have an alcohol event? It's an interesting question. I don't know, that we like ourselves better when we're a little less inhibited. Or why is it we need alcohol to lubricate the situation?
I think it's a I guess vicious cycle, right? First, you need to like shut off the noise for whatever reason. I think people are very uncomfortable with their own thoughts to begin with and need something to distract themselves. And then when they take on said distraction, something interesting happens. Everyone else is doing it. So now you don't feel in place, or rather you don't feel comfortable because everyone else around you is doing something that you're not going to do. And most people are not at that level where they go, oh, everyone else is drinking, I'm going to chill out. Without some training. Like, for example, when I talk to people in AA, I say you're developing a sobriety habit,
Yeah.
much like you develop a drinking habit. And that sobriety habit in most people is unbelievably weak to non-existent. The same, and it's probably related to whatever it is that makes us able to stand up for ourselves in a group setting, right? I think people are very good, or at least better than they are dealing with a group, at standing up for themselves individually. I think we run into a really interesting challenge when it's here's a group behavior that no one is actually criticizing as a whole. In fact, it's being encouraged, and I'm not going to do it. And you very quickly learn, and a lot of us are not good at, coping with this, that it's you're not welcome initially until you come in and you're just like, this is me, take it or leave it. But that's a certain level of your sobriety habit being developed.
Mm-hmm. Well, alcohol gives you confidence that you don't necessarily always have. It relaxes your inhibitions. It brings, like you said, it turns off your stress and your work voice. You wrote another book, The Four Confidences. Can you tell me some of your tips about building confidence so you don't have to rely on external, drinking confidence?
Yeah. So the cool thing about I wrote that book because I was thinking about an interesting problem we see somewhere else, which is hiring. And one of the things they talk about, one of the problems we have in hiring is it's like we want people with experience. Well, how do I get experience? Well, you got to hire me, but I'm not going to hire you because you don't have experience. So it's this problem, okay? And I think confidence has a similar issue. It's like, how do you get confidence? Well, be successful at something. Well, how do you move successfully? Well, you got to move confidently. Well, I don't have confidence. Well, what am I going to do? So I said, okay, if I can't rely on my previous successes to have confidence in some domain, how else can I develop confidence? Well, I can look at people who have done what I'm trying to do and believe that I'll be able to do that if I follow similar steps. I can have faith in the teacher that I'm entrusting to instruct me. The mere fact that I'm here, I can draw confidence from that. The whole point of the book is to learn to look at things that indicate you will be able to succeed and make that relationship. So if I was to relate that to sobriety, I would look and go, okay, and this really helped me. Other people have done this.
Mm-hmm.
I can do this too. No one is any better or worse than me. If people have been able to put the bottle down, I can put the bottle down, right?
Yeah.
If people are able to be fun and outgoing, I can do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once you look around and see that, then it's just having a little faith. That's what we need, a little faith. That you give something enough time, a little bit of time. You don't need much. Then the results start to come in, and then when you get that thing, you get that little bit of success that you can lean on and build confidence from that. It's really hard to be confident that you'll go a year sober, for example, if you haven't even gone a week. But if you just white knuckle that week with some inspiration, you're like, okay, I did this. Maybe I can do a month. Maybe I can do 6 months.
What are the four different confidences that you talk about?
Confidence in the process, confidence in the instruction, confidence in the past, and confidence in, we'll call it similarity. Because I always forget the word I use in that, but it's the confidence where you look and see that other people have done it and you believe that you'll be able to do it as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of mirroring what other people have done. If they can do it, you can do it. We talked a little bit before we were recording about how beauty is more on the inside, and that being a boxer, being beat up, and I'm sure you've had your face broken, your nose broken, you're bruised up. What do you think about that, beauty being on the outside versus the inside? I mean, you see how society is changing. Everybody's so focused on their appearance and Botox and fillers. What are your thoughts?
Well, Well, here are my general thoughts about the idea. I think that humans have, we grab so much information from what we see. That's a very powerful sense, and we've evolved to make a lot of decisions and a lot of associations with that, for better or worse. With that said, at the end of the day, the most important thing are your relationships with other people. I wholeheartedly believe that. And the only way you cultivate these relationships is to focus on the things that you cannot see, the trust you build in a person, the way you make someone feel, the way you treat them, the respect, all of these things, those don't have anything to do with how you look. And I think if you have to pick one, if you could pick between being unbelievably beautiful, but you go home at night and there's no one to talk to, you don't have any friends, even your social media is dead, right?
Mhm.
Or are you ugly as sin? But every time you want to go out and have a good time, there's somebody who's excited to hear from you and excited to see you. You got a large family. I think most of us would choose the latter option. And that, to me, when I think about the inner beauty versus the outer beauty kind of discussion, that's where it comes from, or that's what it comes down to for me, is that your life will not be fulfilling if you only focus on external beauty. That is not to say that's not important and we can't feel good from it, but if you focus on that to the neglect of everything else that you can't see, it is not going to be an enjoyable time on this planet for you.
It's true. I think in so many ways that external beauty doesn't even give you confidence anymore, because I see some of the most beautiful people in the world. They sit in my chair and they're very insecure with very low self esteem. And like you said, they don't have anyone they're dating. They're not approachable. They're not happy people. It's very weird. You would think these gorgeous people should be so blessed and thrilled with what God's given them, but you have to feel self worth from what you've achieved and what you've created. And like you said, what you've studied, what you've mastered, the hours you put into it. That's what makes you.
And the people around you.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, these beautiful people who are still in your chair to become more beautiful, because to them, they have decided that that is the most important thing. And that's an interesting trap, because beauty and the way we perceive it is, there's no, yes, there, one can look at something and go, that's more beautiful than that. But it's not like it's not like mutual exclusion. It's not like, you got to pick one. And so we know this, and we see this and experience this in our own lives. So if I was to only focus on looks, I could never feel like the most good looking person. I'd always have to engage in some type of activity to try and put down people around me and elevate myself. And usually those activities, if not always, tend to come at a substantial cost to the relationships you could build with other people.
Yeah.
And there's no way to win that game. You can't do it. You'll be the most beautiful person for like 5 minutes until you realize two things. One, there are always, well, three things really. One, beauty is depreciating. We're all going to get old and ugly at some point. Two, there's always somebody that's going to come up who is, if part of beauty is novelty, right? So there's always going to be someone new that shows up. And the last part, you realize that beauty is a currency, but it doesn't buy you everything, and it actually doesn't buy you the most important things too. Like you're saying, that sense of fulfillment, those relationships that I'm talking about, that is not something that you can buy with beauty. There's no way to be so beautiful you make someone like you. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's
That's
no way to be so beautiful for someone's like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm feeling down. I want to see this person because their beautiful face is gonna make me feel better. No, they want to see you because your conversation and your presence makes them feel better. And I think the people who focus on beauty, they, for whatever reason, get that all twisted, and they find out the hard way, if they find out at all, that it's not about that.
I loved what you said. Beauty depreciates. It definitely does. There's always someone younger and hotter. And like at any given point, you're your most attractive today, not tomorrow, today.
Right. Not only that, man, I could leave. I could go out the house after this podcast and end up falling and banging my face up or something, man. I know that this body is not, one day it's going to get old, ugly, wrinkly. I'm not going to be able to do anything. And so I don't put an attachment on that. But what I know is that, if I play my cards right, over the next 30 to 40 years, I should be able to build a decent family and some strong relationships, so that when I get old and I'm about to die, or it's the holidays, I have people that I hang out with. Beauty's not going to beauty didn't buy me that when I was younger. And when I don't have any of it, when I really need it when I'm older, it's not going to buy me any of those relationships.
It's so true. When you were younger and you were one of the, hip hop top boxers out there, you must have had lots of girls throwing themselves at you left and right. When you got to, well, I was just in Vegas, and you go out to clubs these days, and it's just kind of appalling to me that, I mean, I'm not a prude, but the way that women really like doll themselves up and reveal every little thing, and just like they really put out there that they're all their worth is in their outer looks. It's I wonder what a guy thinks about that. What did you think?
Well, let me tell you something that I think is hilarious, that someone's saying I can't take credit for this, but in response to the idea that like all guys are after is sex, it's like, well, if that's all you're selling, what else am I going to be buying? And I don't know if my only ability, right, those odds, is I look at the presentation, and the presentation says I'm offering sex appeal, then what I'm going to come and attempt to buy is sex appeal. It's not like you're walking around with a book or something like that, and come with that. Now, that's not to say that, like, men don't, shoot their shot at anything moving. But if you want to be a target, if you want to get hit with a heat-seeking missile, throw out some heat, and that heat is in the form of, well, the dress that we just spoke of, and the attitudes that we just went through. And one of the most interesting things to really happen in the past 20 years has been social media, and the effect that social media has had, particularly on women. And I just, Dr. John Haidt writes about this in the coddling of I think it's called the millennial, or the American mind, or something to that. But one of his arguments he posits, he talks about how internet bullying or cyberbullying is more intense on girls than boys, because when boys are aggressive, because both sexes, I guess, are like equally aggressive towards one another, right? It's just how they do it. Boys tend to go and try and, kick each other's asses, right? That's just what we do. It's a physical hierarchy. Girls, it's always been a social hierarchy. The difference, what has happened with social media, is that, before the bullying stopped when you went home, that was it. And now the bullying still stops when you go home for boys, because of how we bully each other, but it's so much worse for girls, and that's gotta be playing a role in how they present themselves in reality. I mean, it will not, definitely is, because it's once again, it's that attempt to be more beautiful, but you can't win that game.
I think guys don't even try play that game. Like if I look at a guy's Instagram, he's not taking 75 photos to find the best lighting, best angles, and like, where do I look the most handsome? You guys just are not doing that. I'm sure I'm stereotyping and generalizing, but women are the ones that are so self-critical, overly analytic, and they're scared to put their image out there. They know they're going to be judged. Whether they're doing too much to their face, too little to their face, or they're not looking perfect. It's just kind of a real sad statement. Whereas men, I don't see that. You guys like throw some soap and lotion on, you shave, and you hit the door. You're out the door.
Men traditionally have not really been valued for their
Their
appearance.
looks. That's so
That's a woman's game.
yeah.
And social media has made that a high stakes game that you can always play
Yeah.
with everyone around the world, as opposed to how it was beforehand, which was a relatively low stakes game and it was local. You were
Yeah.
competing
With your high
against
school
a
or your
few
college.
different girls in your neighborhood. You couldn't log on and see this, obsess over it constantly,
Yeah.
and that's really changed. And that's where I think, in fact, not even I think this once again. This guy, I just love Dr. Haidt's research, but he pointed out in one of his speeches that right around the turn of the 2010s, right? So like between 2005 and 2010, the incidences of mental health issues at college campuses like skyrocketed,
Yeah.
and that coincided with the social media generation, the cell
Mm-hmm.
phone and app generation. All of those things happen, and all of a sudden now you get people who they can't escape that race. And images, sex is always sold, right? I mean that's nothing new.
Mm-hmm.
But what is new is where you can buy it at and how much it costs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're bombarded now with these images, and many of them are not real. They're filtered. They're fully makeup, coated in makeup and contoured out the wazoo. It's
We
not
were
real.
saying like guys don't go through this, but a small minority do. And then what you just made me think of is that, and now fortunately, there's a big or at least relatively larger policing against this in most fitness communities. But there'll be guys that like are like literally roided out and using all kind of performance enhancers, and then they're telling their audience that they're natural. That's how they got that way.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
I guess guys get that too. Then you guys get it also. You got to get the muscles and everything.
and it all comes back. Well, it doesn't all come back to this, but I think it is a significant motivator. Money. If you can make a lot of people feel insecure, and your product offers them security, you'll have customers for life.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, I think women need to do a better job of marketing themselves. You're absolutely right. Like if you're selling sex and putting on the sexy dress and the sexy outfit, like okay, your customer, the guy who wants the sex, is coming. But we should market ourselves slightly differently when we get out there. It's okay to be an attractive package, but maybe it should have more dimensionality.
Yeah, it's like just very little imagination. One of the things that I noticed, I have a unique perspective on this. I think when I was 18, I tried to go to college and failed out, so I got the typical experience. And then I went back to college. I enrolled when I was 28, graduated when I was 33. And so I got to see two different generations in college. And it really amazed me. One of the things that I remember talking about to somebody is is how often I got complimented on my shoes. That stood out to me because I always wore nice shoes, and I guess that's not something anyone, or at least guys that age, do. And
Mm-hmm.
also, every girl, or the majority, I won't say every, the majority of girls wear these leggings, and these leggings are like, I know, sure, comfort, right? But they are so tight, they don't leave anything for any god to imagine, and your eyes is just always focused, because what else you gonna look at? Because that's like how we were programmed, designed. If you throw a bunch of 20 something girls around, the 20 something guys are just gonna be like, they're not gonna know what to do. uh,
It's like putting steak in front of a lion. What are you gonna do? You
Right.
gotta attack it.
It's not fortunate we live in a society where no one can get attacked. Well, I mean, or at least not without severe repercussion. But it does raise some very interesting problems that I don't think we are interested in talking about yet. because they involve what many people uh, would consider regression or suppression of our right to express ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Are you a fan? I know you're a fan of Stoicism. Talk a little bit about that, because not everybody that's listening knows what that is or how that would apply to modern life as we live it.
So I just, I give my definition, which is, useful enough or accurate enough to make some useful predictions, but by no means complete. Stoicism to me is the practice of getting in between stimulus and emotional response. I never make, and I don't believe the Stoics make, contrary to what people think, the claim that you can control your emotions. That is impossible. But what you can do is control how you react to your emotions. There's a secondary reaction. You get angry, then what? Right? Do I lose my mind and do I go swinging? Do I fume or do I go, okay, I'm angry about this, but I have to focus? You get afraid. Do I get afraid and retreat into a shell, or do I go, okay, I'm afraid, but there's a task that needs to be done, so it doesn't really matter. And you can see how this theme would really be developed in my life, particularly in boxing, also largely in my upbringing in the projects, because you grow up in that environment. If you react without thinking, you're going to be in a situation that may not turn out favorably. Actually, it's not going to turn out favorably. It's more a question of how unfavorable it'll turn out. A hospital visit, or somebody going to tell your mom that you're not coming home tonight. That kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
But even in boxing, you have to learn, because every fight is afraid, right? Any fighter that says he's not afraid is a psychopath or a liar, and that's the truth. But you still have to go perform. You still have to fight, and you have to fight effectively. Your emotions cannot get involved. Eventually you get to a point where you can use your emotions to your advantage, like any anger you might feel. But when you first start, you have to kill. You have to get control of that. You have to get in between that response. For example, a very, very slight, like actual real example that is not necessarily tied to emotions. Most people, when I flick at them, they flinch. That's what you should do. That is your natural response. If you do that in a fight, you're going to get killed. You're gonna bite on feints. That's what we do. We feint. We try and get you, because the more tired you get, the more you resort to those bad habits. And if I catch you with a feint later in the fight, I'm gonna probably light you up pretty good, because now you're not in control. All right. Take that a step further. I got that walk, that walk to the ring, and that wait in the locker room. You don't really have a lot to think about, but except what's about to happen. And so you can't even distract yourself. So what do? You learn that this is terrifying, but I'm going to proceed anyway. And if you do that enough, you don't stop being afraid. You just develop a different response to fear. Like I develop a different response to flinching. Like I develop a different response to sadness. I think another great benefit of fighting is that it really taught me that I have to be in control of my emotions and not the other way around. Otherwise, I will not have success. And I think that lesson applies to everything in life.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. I mean, you can't control your emotions. You can control how you react to things. I think that's
Absolutely.
critical.
And going a little further on that, I wish people understood. I wish people appreciated how much better their life could be if they just get in that gap between what happens to them and what they do about it. Because that's the source of everyone's problems. All of your problems are created or solved in that gap.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't control, stuff's gonna happen randomly to you just because you're on this planet. That's part of, it's like the cost of being human. Sometimes some good stuff is gonna happen, sometimes some bad stuff's gonna happen, and you're not gonna have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
But you do have 100% control what you do after it happens.
It's Sure, it's like being an adult is learning how to roll with the punches. Every day you're like, okay, I'm ready. Come get me. What's happening?
100%.
What's gonna come at me today? Is it the broken down car? Is it a kid with the problem? Is it your staff at work? Is it a patient gonna get you? But it's always something. But you're right.
Always something.
You gotta get out of bed with the attitude of like, this is gonna be a good day, and no matter what anybody throws at me, I'm gonna handle it. That's all you can say.
I tell people all the time, and it's interesting because this annoys some people who I think are not as developed as they will be one day, hopefully. That I haven't had a bad day since I stopped drinking.
Mm.
That doesn't mean that bad things haven't happened or challenging things haven't happened to me, but I got rid of the one thing that robbed me of my emotional agency.
Mm.
And I haven't had a bad day since because I get to choose the caliber of the day. I get to, I make decisions. Unfortunately, all of my sober decisions, none of them have taken me anywhere close to the back of a police car. So, that'd be like the worst thing that could happen that I have control over, but other things have happened since then too. And I just look at them all the same. I get to choose how to respond to this. I
Mm.
get to choose what to do. And that doesn't mean I get to choose my emotional response. If you want to drill down to like the most precise wording, I don't get to choose my emotional response. I will be angry, I'll be sad, I'll be happy, I'll be disappointed, like any other human. But I have 100% control over that next step.
Mm. Well, that's probably the hardest thing is whatever it was that pushed you to decide that you were going to be the boss and step away from the alcohol. Like, I don't know. What is that one decision? Because so many people they mentally decide they want to do, but then they can't do it. Or they do it for a little
You
bit and they
know,
keep falling.
pain is one hell of a motivator. I think um,
You have to be broken a little bit, I guess. You have
yeah,
to break.
you don't have to hit rock bottom, but you should be knocked down a few times. And when you focus on that pain, one of the things I tell people when I talk to them, I go, you need three things if you want to make a big change, like getting sober or something like that. You need something that you're afraid of
Yeah.
to run from. You need something that you want that you're running towards, and you have to acknowledge that you're afraid of what will happen if you don't make it from the former to the latter. And that fear gives you a healthy respect for the process and everything that goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to make any major change, it doesn't matter what it is. We're just using sobriety because that's been the theme and that's something important to me. But it could be anything, getting in shape, making more money, whatever. You gotta go, okay, right now, this sucks. And if I keep doing what I'm doing, it's probably gonna suck. So let me start doing something different. I'm running away and I don't really know what might be best. We'll figure that out as long as I'm moving towards something and run away from it. It's imagining the negative consequences, and it's like negative visualization, and it's incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's so inspirational. I think you're such a powerful guy. All these things you've said, all the years of boxing, alcohol, nothing has stopped you from being an intellect, a thinker. I can feel it. I really do. It's
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the conversation about beauty. I thought today when we are talking to a boxer, like, what are we going to talk to? What are we going to talk about?
You
But
think you were wondering that?
you were probably wondering too. What are you going to talk to a plastic surgeon about? But that whole conversation about like beauty on the inside and people not understanding this false pursuit of happiness by chasing the ephemeral. That's crazy.
Yes.
So powerful.
Generally, generally speaking, if you try to build your house on sand, one day the wind gonna blow, and you will find out real fast that was a bad idea. Because not
Yes,
only are you not gonna have a house, you're not even gonna have a place to build a house.
that's
So you
right.
have to build your house. That analogy or that metaphor is, you have to build your life on things that will persist and will last, and your physical appearance will not last. it's good bait, right? It brings some people in, but you better have some substance, otherwise, as the worms get older and worse tasting, you still got to eat some fish. So how you gonna bring it in? No one's gonna bite. What are they gonna bite on? What bait you got?
Otherwise, who are you in this world if you don't build that? Because your career will change, your beauty will change. Nothing is fully lasting except what you've earned and mastered. So I guess we would tell our audience to master a skill, to build their intellect, to build their relationships, and to like look outside themselves for joy and, create, to be a creator, to not just be a consumer. Like, don't just consume.
Yeah, and when I say be a creator, or when you say be a creator, what I hear and interpret is my idea of being a creator as well, and that's anything that costs you energy is a creation. It's just a matter of, do you get a return on said investment? And this is why I always go back to the relationships of the people. You always get a return on that investment. I think the only thing that's more guaranteed or at the same level of guarantee is the energy you put into your health, right? But that's like an internal thing that you can't really give to anyone else. But if you take time to build strong relationships with other people, it's very hard to be unhappy. And even if you do become unhappy, you have people to help you get back to a state of happiness and contentment. And that's really what I think we're missing most in this modern world. Is my fiance said this quote, and I took it from her, and she didn't even remember saying it. But one day she said that social media has made close relationships distant and distant relationships close. And what I took from that is that, yeah, we can reach out right now. You're on the other side of the country, but this podcast will end. And what am I going to do? Is there somebody in my home to hang out with? Well, sure. My sister's going to come over for dinner and it's going to be a good time. Right. But uh, who knows if other people have that luxury when they log off the digital world? It creates this illusion that you have these connections and you don't really have them. You have to foster these things in real life.
You really do. It's not on the airwaves. But I so enjoyed our conversation today. Ed, where can people find you on your social media handles?
Well, the cool thing is that I am Ed Latimore everywhere. If somebody comes up with that name, they're gonna be out of luck till I die, and maybe I'll get memorialized. So Ed Latimore on Instagram, Ed Latimore on Twitter. You can find me, just type in Ed Latimore in the Facebook, either my personal or my business page will come up. My website is edlatimore.com, right? So I'm everywhere, Ed Latimore.
Well, there you have it. And that's Latimore. Such a pleasure talking to you. Can't wait to meet you in person someday. If you're ever in LA, come stop by and say hi.
Oh, man, you guys are brave living in Los Angeles. I was out there I actually lived out there as part of my amateur career, the last part of it. Okay. And then I went back again 8 years later, last summer. And I was like, man, it is so hard to get around.
Well, we'll put you up on the beach somewhere in Malibu. It'll be perfect. That's it for now, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. And don't forget to find me on my Instagram. It's Beauty by Dr. K, DRKAY, doing amazing things with people's faces and hopefully teaching you guys that beauty is on the inside, most importantly. You can check out my skincare line on our website. It's beautybydrk.com. And that's it for now. Stay beautiful. Thank you, Ed.